Welcome, everyone. We'll just give it a few more minutes to let more people join, and then we will get started. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ohio Aging and Disability Transportation Forum series. We are on series 1. I thank all of you for signing up and joining us today. Today, we will be looking at a deeper look into transportation surveys and how they actually help our local communities. Today's forum has been brought to you by Services for Independent Living, the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center, and the Buckeye Hills Regional Council. My name is India Jones. I am the Community Services Manager here at Services for Independent Living, and I will also be your webinar facilitator for today. Just to go over a few housekeeping rules, all participants will be muted during the webinar, so please save any questions that you have for the end. You can put them in the questions box and we will attempt to answer them as soon as we're finished with the entire presentation. A recording of this presentation will be available on our website. I'm going to put it on both the Ohio Aging and Disability Transportation website and SEAL's website. There will be a satisfaction survey that will pop up at the end. Please feel free to fill it out. This is how we get feedback on how we're doing or what other transportation issues you would love to hear about. And then a copy of this actual PowerPoint is available for download in the handout section. So if you would like to download it, please feel free to do so. We have two wonderful ladies with us today that will be talking about transportation surveys with us. First up, we have Melissa Gray. She is the Assistant Director of Transportation and the Senior Program Manager over at the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center. I just want to say thank you so much for agreeing to come on to talk with us today. And I am going to turn things over to you.
Thanks so much, India. And I also want to thank the Ohio Aging and Disability Transportation Coalition for inviting me to speak to you all this morning. So good morning, everyone. As India mentioned, I am the Assistant Director of Transportation at US Aging and the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center. For those who are on the call that are not familiar with the NADTC, I wanted to provide just a brief overview of our center's work. Next slide. The NADTC is, excuse me, one of 5 centers that's funded by the Federal Transit Administration, 5 technical assistance centers. We were established in 2015, and we are a partnership between US Aging and Easter SEALs. We receive our funding, as mentioned, by the FTA, but we also receive guidance from the Administration for Community Living. As you can see on our screen, I'm sorry, everyone. A little frog in my throat. As you can see on the screen, our mission is to promote the availability of accessible transportation options that serve older adults, people with disabilities, caregivers, and the communities in which they reside. We support older adults and people with disabilities of all ages and their families to help them find the best mobility options in their communities. But primarily we serve professionals in the field of transportation, aging, disability, human services, and caregiving. Some of our major objectives that we provide: person-centered information and technical assistance on a variety of topics such as accessible transportation, senior transportation, the ADA, Section 5310, as well as other funding sources. We offer training through webinars, various online courses, and we also participate in conferences, not as much as we used to, but are still participating in some virtual conferences and provide training through those mechanisms. We use a variety of communication channels. For instance, our website, we house a robust clearinghouse of resources and publications. So invite you to visit us at www.nadtc.org. We're also present on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, but also invite you to subscribe to our monthly e-alerts so that you can stay abreast on our work as well as the work of many local communities across the country. And then lastly, we invest in community solutions. I'm sorry, I skipped one. We're involved in coordination and partnership. One of the big initiatives that the Federal Transit Administration tasked their TA centers is to work more on coordination, not just only among the centers, but also among transportation between human services organizations. So just this year, we initiated a coordination campaign and developed a coordination committee to serve in that role to work on coordination issues in the field of transportation. And then lastly, we invest in community solutions by empowering transportation programs, empowering communities across the country to implement and improve innovative transportation options that serve older adults and people with disabilities at the local level. And we primarily do that through our grant funding. We actually just closed our grant 2021 annual grant, and we'll be awarding those grants fairly soon. Next slide. So at the NADTC, we have set out some specific goals and objectives for conducting various surveys. So if you can go to the next slide, India. So the reason why we conduct transportation surveys, primarily we want to gather some reliable data on some of the major challenges as well as the best practices that we're seeing and finding in the communities about transportation options, accessing these transportation options for older adults and people with disabilities. We also want to document the experiences and perceptions of older adults and younger adults and caregivers and how they access and use public and private transportation in their communities. Additionally, we are always looking to gain insight into respondents' transportation behaviors. What are some of the things that they need? What are their travel preferences, their behaviors? And we do this in order to update and expand the current body of research that's out there, and also to inform transportation policies and practices. And then finally, we want to shine a light on promising approaches that assure greater equity and accessibility in providing community transportation options for these population groups specifically across the United States. Next slide. So I wanted to spend just a little bit of time to talk with you today about our survey work at the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center. So in our effort to conduct environmental scans, to highlight some of the major challenges as well as some of the major community practices for providing accessible transportation to older adults, younger people with disabilities, and to support transportation professionals. We have administered a number of national surveys in order to collect data directly from older adults and people with disabilities and transportation professionals and caregivers. Next slide. Older adults and people with disabilities, we know, require access to transportation for a variety of daily tasks and activities, from medical appointments to social events. I mean, many of us know that they've now labeled transportation as being a social determinant of health, something that older adults and people with disabilities need to stay active in the community, to be able to maintain and live in the community as long as possible. And though we know these things, however, information about their needs and their preferences remain pretty limited and sparse. So to fill this gap, the NADTC partnered with KRC Research in 2018 to conduct a national needs assessment on older adults and people with disabilities and caregivers. The survey questions focused on experiences and perceptions about public and private transportation options and behaviors and patterns of the population groups and the things that they needed to get to the destinations they needed and wanted to go. Next slide. Also in 2018, along with our researcher, KRC, they conducted a supplemental analysis to provide a snapshot of transportation attitudes, behaviors, and needs among older adults and younger adults with disabilities who live in small towns and rural areas. Now, the need for this additional research on this issue emerged from a group discussion that we held with several national transportation experts. This was following a press briefing that we had in 2018 when we released the results of our initial needs assessment poll. Now, specifically, this group recommended that the poll results be stratified by race and then also location, due to the varying transportation and mobility challenges experienced by diverse groups. So this rural report, this supplemental report that was conducted, represents a partial response to that recommendation and will lead to further analysis in some of our future surveys. Next slide. Also in 2018, 2018 was a busy year for us in terms of surveying and getting some research. KRC also developed a directional observations assessment. This outlined insights from our initial 2018 poll of younger adults with disabilities and older adults and caregivers. But this was related specifically to African American and Hispanic American individuals with disabilities. The sample size for African American and Hispanic American individuals with disabilities were small and not adequately robust for statistical reliable insights. Although the sample sizes were small, they were adequate to compare to others in the survey. However, these findings were to be considered, our researchers told us that we would need to consider them as more directional observations and to be used for internal purposes only because of the sample size and the findings being so limited. But our desire to collect more data on these specific population groups and other diverse populations would later form our work in establishing a transportation diversity, equity and inclusion initiative and a survey. Next slide. So moving on to 2019, as a follow-up to our 2018 National Needs Assessment Survey on older adults and people with disabilities and caregivers, the NEDTC, in partnership with KRC Research again, conducted a survey of transportation providers that serve those populations specifically. The survey asked providers to respond to questions about communications and outreach, driver training and safety, coordination, funding, and challenges and unmet needs in their communities. Providers were also invited to share their experiences and opinions about the future of transportation. One section of the survey focuses on providers that received a 5310 funding as well. Next slide. So our 2018 poll of older adults, people with disabilities and caregivers, collected data about their experiences and perceptions of transportation services. And as I previously mentioned, since the data was not sufficiently representative of the racial and ethnic and cultural diversity of the United States, we decided in 2021, this year, to conduct a national equity, diversity, and inclusion transportation survey of older adults, younger adults with disabilities and caregivers from historically marginalized and underserved communities across the U.S. Now, several things impacted our decision to conduct this survey, including a growing awareness that racial inequities and bias against particular groups have long impacted access to a wide range of community services, including transportation. Now, this 2021 survey gauged opinions, and we also obtained information from a representative sample of racially, ethnically, and culturally diverse older adults, younger adults with disabilities, and family caregivers about their experiences accessing and using local transportation options in the US. Next slide. So outside of the national surveys that we have conducted, the NADTC also conducts annual and ongoing surveys with our constituents. The annual survey of NADTC constituencies focuses on topics of interest regarding the intersection of older adults and people with disabilities and transportation. And it also identifies needs and gathers input on our products, on our priorities and activities that we conduct at the center. And results of these surveys, these annual surveys, are shared with the Federal Transit Administration. Additionally, we survey online course and webinar participants. So everyone who has, anyone who participates in our webinars or takes an online course from us, and we survey them to identify their level of learning and understanding of a given topic. And we also want to know their satisfaction level with the training experience. Evaluation information is, we collect that from folks. Usually the evaluation is sent out immediately after the event and stay open for about 10 to 14 days. And we share these survey results with our management team along with our independent evaluator for the center. We review this data to identify potential future topics, any unanswered questions and suggestions for improvement of the center's work. Next slide. So how surveys impact future work? Well, the information that we've been able to glean from surveys have been instrumental in guiding current and the future work of the NADTC. For example, as we all know, in doing any type of survey, it gives you hard numbers, produces hard numbers on the opinions and behaviors of people that we can use as a center to make important decisions moving forward. Surveys also provide a snapshot and insight for NADTC and other agencies that we work with to assist local communities to create accessible transportation solutions that respond to current and future mobility needs. And then lastly, our survey, these surveys have aided us in determining the priorities of our future work activities, as well as they've allowed us to gather information on current topics, current trends, things of interest regarding accessible transportation for older adults and people with disabilities, as well as caregivers across the country. Next slide. So I just wanted to leave you with a few resources. These are links to some resources, as well as links to some of the surveys that I referenced in my talk today. And then our final slide is our contact information. You can reach us at our toll-free number or via email. You can visit our website. But we also invite you again to keep in touch with us on our sort of social media channels. And please, if you haven't had a chance, we invite you to sign up for our e-newsletters. And with that, I want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Melissa. That was awesome. I really, this topic is something that I really wanted to hear more about myself, as far as how the transportation surveys, the impact that they have on all the data collection and our actual communities. So next up, we're going to have Brandy Hesson talk with us. She is a mobility manager from Buckeye Hills, and she absolutely is happy to be here as well. And we're happy to have her. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to her, and you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to be part of your coalition today. I'd like to welcome you to this discussion of Not Another Survey. Again, my name is Brandy Hesson, and I'm from Buckeye Hills Regional Council, and I am the Washington County Mobility Manager. So let's get started. Next slide. There's my contact information. Sorry. Next slide. So have you ever seen so many surveys in your life? I mean, you go to any fast food restaurant and they're always trying to get you to complete the survey link at the end of your receipt. And if you do, you will receive a free sandwich or something like that. Or if you go to a department store where they want you to also complete a survey, but you may be able to be entered into a drawing to win $500 or $5 off your next purchase. There are so many surveys available. So why are transportation surveys so important? To get this answer, we need to start at the very beginning. Next slide, please. Okay, we do not need to go back to the Stone Ages, but rather to the development of the County Coordinated Transportation Plan. This plan is required by ODOT for small urban and rural areas of Ohio to be eligible for 5310 funding. A county coordinated transportation plan is a locally developed plan that identifies community transportation resources, understands gaps and unmet needs within those resources, and determines the approach to addressing these gaps and unmet needs. This plan is developed and approved through a process that includes participation by seniors, transportation providers, human service providers, and members of the general public. So if you're like to be part of this process, please reach out to your mobility manager. They would greatly appreciate your help. Next slide, please. Okay, so now you're thinking, what does transportation survey have to do with the development of the county coordinated transportation plan? Well, surveys play a huge role in the gaps and unmet needs section of this plan. What better way to find out what needs and gaps are not being met by transportation providers than by asking the general public that use this service? I know what you're thinking, just like me. I worked at Buckeye Hills Regional Council for 12 years as an information and assistance specialist. I would get calls every week from someone seeking transportation to dialysis. I knew when I took this job, the big gap in the county that I thought was this issue that I needed to solve, transportation to dialysis. So when I was working with the transportation committee and developing a survey, I advocated that we needed to make sure that we included this question in the survey so we can look at options to fill this needs and gaps. Well, after we did our survey, passed it out to the general public, received them back, and analyzed the data, the transportation to dialysis didn't even show up as a need in that survey. I was shocked. Do you know what the #1 need in our county was due to the survey? It was individuals were not even aware that we had public transportation in our county. Wow. Talk about an eye-opening experience. So to help with this need or gap that was identified, we made, to help with the need or gap that was identified by the public, we made the #1 goal in our Washington County Coordinated Transportation Plan was a continuation of the Mobility Manager Program to educate and advertise more regarding transportation options available in Washington County. Without a transportation survey to the public, I would have been using all my efforts finding transportation to and from dialysis treatments, which was not even the focus of our county needs. Next slide, please. Next, transportation surveys also allow us to identify specific area in transportation where gaps are and individual transportation needs are not being met. For an example, in Washington County, one of the biggest transportation needs is out of county non-emergency medical transportation. Most people in the county travel to Columbus to see specialists and doctors. This need was identified in the surveys we collected. Due to this need being identified, we are able to add this to an unmet need or gap in transportation services in the Washington County Coordinated Transportation Plan. Since this is identified as an unmet need or gap in services in our county plan, we are now able to seek out ways we can address this as a need. As a mobility manager, I can seek out funding opportunities to address the need. I can also look at collaborating with other mobility managers and transit agencies to transport the individual out of the county, by maybe meeting up at county lines. Or I can advocate to legislator and elected officials that this is an identified barrier for individuals seeking transportation to medical appointments outside of our county. Next slide. So what does a transportation survey look like? Every transportation survey looks a little different because they are based on needs of that county. Surveys can change from year to year. Again, there is no wrong or right survey. ODOT does provide us with a template to get started, but in the end, it's up to the mobility manager, the transportation community, to develop a survey that works best for the county. Here's a copy of the transportation survey we developed for Washington County. When developing this survey, we knew we wanted it to keep it short because individuals are more likely to complete a survey that does not take up a lot of time. We also wanted to include questions we thought were relevant to our county. I'm not going to go over this survey completely, but just wanted to point out a few questions that are important to our region. If you would like a copy of the survey later, please let me know. I'd be happy to email it to you. The first question I'd like to discuss is question number 2. India, you should be able to click again and highlight question 2. Maybe. Okay. No, that's fine. Question 2 is, I consider myself, and then it gives you a list. It says like low income, disabled, seniors, none of the above, veterans, unhoused, student. I think this question is important because you want to make sure you have included everyone in your survey. Because an individual with disability, a senior, and a college student all have different transportation needs. You want to make sure everybody's voice is heard. The next question that I thought was important is question number 6. And that should highlight too, maybe not. Is public transportation, carpooling, or senior services transportation option for you? This question was important because it made me realize how many people had no idea of their transportation options in their county. And the last question I'd like to talk about is question 13. Have you ever missed a medical appointment in the last 12 months due to transportation? The answer to this was amazing. The people that have missed medical appointments due to lack of transportation was huge in Washington County. I'm not sure if it's because they're unaware of the transportation options or because the appointments were out of the county and finding public transportation out of the county was difficult. Is the Washington County survey perfect? Absolutely not, but it did show the needs in our county, and that was the most important thing. Next slide. Now it's going to highlight. Next. There you go. So now I know what you're thinking. Where is a transportation survey and how can I help? Transportation surveys look different and can be found in different locations in your county or region. The mobility manager, with the help of transportation committee, developed a survey and discussed where they would like the survey to be distributed. Some counties have hard copies, some have online surveys through a link. Some go through a link on social media or have QR codes posted around town or in newspapers. Some do all the above. There's no right or wrong answer. The main goal is to collect the most data from the general public. However, these surveys are not always available for completion. Surveys are usually done once a year with a set time limit in mind. For an example, some surveys are out to the public for 45 days during that year, or 90 days, or even 6 months. The time limit for completion of the survey is up to the mobility manager and the transportation committee for that county. Again, can't express it enough. If you would like to help with the development of the survey or help distribute the survey in your county, please reach out to your mobility manager. Next slide. Overall, transportation surveys are not just another survey that can offer you a chance to win $500 or a free sandwich, but they can help identify an unmet need in transportation in the county. As a mobility manager and transportation provider, we can only fix the issues we know of. Sorry. I would like to thank each and every one of you for being part of my first ever presentation. You guys have been awesome. If you have any questions or would like any additional information or would just like to say hi, this is my contact information. Also, if you would like to connect with your mobility manager in your county, here is the website that lists all the mobility managers in Ohio along with their contact information. Thank you again and have a great day.
All right. See, you rocked out, Brandy.
Thanks,
Thank
Brian.
you so much for coming on today, to you and Melissa. I hope that everyone in the audience was able to get a better understanding of why transportation surveys are so important and why we actually need to take the time to fill them out when asked to. I'm going to go and look, but it doesn't look like we have any questions, which is not always a bad thing at all. Maybe we did a good job and no one has a question. But please feel free to download the PowerPoint. It's in the handout section. So that way you can kind of have this information for your own safekeep. And also you can have the information of the two fine ladies who presented for us today. I hope everybody has signed up to attend our transportation forum, which is our mobility manager panel that's coming up next week on October 12th. You don't want to miss that one. We get a lot of questions about what mobility managers are, what they do, and how they actually help, us in reference to transportation. So I want everybody to please be safe, stay COVID-free, and meet us back here next week. Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you, Brandy, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, India.